Back when I was 20 years old, a friend of mine got into some trouble and went to jail. He needed somebody to go and stay at his place and take care of his elderly dog and to keep his bird fed. I immediately accepted, as I really didn't want to live with my mom and her new, younger boyfriend. Now, here's where I should probably mention that my friend was into some not-so-great things, obviously, since that's how he ended up in jail. The place he lived at wasn't great, and that meant some pretty shady characters would be around sometimes. Those characters usually weren't out after I went to bed, so I didn't see them too often. That was bad enough on its own, but since my friend couldn't pay his electric bill from jail, there were also no lights. Since the bedroom I was staying in had a deadbolt and another lock, I felt okay in there though. I of course realized how stupid and naive I was back then now. After all, I was only 5'3" back then and I weighed only 100 pounds. I guess my desperation for independence drove me to brave it. I would literally wake up the next day to find footprints outside the living room window, and I even found the phone line cut outside once. While all this was going on, my friend's creepy, teeth-missing, pervy landlord started randomly showing up. The landlord only lived like 3 football fields away. Apparently, my friend couldn't pay rent from jail either. He also didn't want me to tell his landlord that he was in jail, so I kept having to give some excuse about him being away at family members' houses or something. But that excuse only went so far, and probably knowing full well that it was made up, the landlord started showing up even more, asking for rent. He started saying nasty things like, "My wife and I would be pretty excited to have you over, especially in a bikini." Soon enough though, the landlord started being angrier and more frustrated each time he would show up. He would just show up at any given time, and since I didn't drive at the time, I was usually there for these unfortunate visits. Eventually, he just started straight up walking in, not even bothering to knock anymore. I told him that was illegal, but he didn't seem to care at all. Earlier, I mentioned that I slept in a locked room. Well, unfortunately, on one morning, I had already got up and made a trip to the kitchen for some water after the sun was already up. Because of the daylight, I didn't bother locking the bedroom door again, I just closed it. Not long after I had fallen back to sleep, a strange, slight noise woke me up. It was sort of a soft clicking sound. I gradually opened my eyes, but I didn't see anything, so I tried to go back to sleep. But then, I suddenly started back awake, and I could just feel another presence in the room with me. As I slowly focused my eyes, I saw the old landlord standing over me and mouth-breathing with a creepy grin on his face. I instantly bolted upright while grabbing the bedsheet and pulling it over my body. I went from 0 to 60 in less than a second, and jumped up, got out of the bed, and yelled at him, giving him an earful very loudly. He backed right up and practically ran out the front door. I locked it behind him and screamed, "I'm calling the cops." The cops came out, but since I had no proof and he didn't hurt me, they really couldn't do much. To this day though, I'll never forget the sound of the landlord's mouth breathing as he leaned in over my sleeping, unsuspecting body. Around 40 years ago, when my dad was still in college, he moved quite away from Vietnam to Connecticut for college. He wanted to be as near as possible to his college, but also wanted to overlook the city skyline. He was a first-generation immigrant and thought he had taken a fair number of English classes in Vietnam. He wasn't fluent and knew nothing about housing in America though. This is why he went the cheap route and rented a shady-looking apartment. His landlord, as he told me later, gave off some serious red flags that he sort of brushed off because the apartment was only $250 a month. Firstly, the landlord's place was directly next to that of my dad's, and during his first night there, while he was getting unpacked, he heard a high-pitched screeching and weird opera music. Again, he brushed it off because he was very tired. The next morning when he awoke, he noticed a chair by his bed that wasn't there before, and when he went to use the bathroom, the toilet seat was up, though he recalled putting it down. Not only that, but his door was unlocked. He again brushed it off because he didn't want to stir up anything with his landlord by asking if he had entered his room, or by asking if it had been broken into, which would take a shot at the landlord by calling his building insecure. He also wanted to explore the city, as his college year did not begin until late August, and he had come 3 weeks early. As he left, he specifically remembered locking his door behind him, but when he returned after a few hours out, he noticed that not only had the door been unlocked, but it was slightly ajar. This went on for weeks until his college year began. Things slightly moved from where he had left them, food missing from his fridge, and other weird happenings. Finally, my dad had enough. One night, he decided to stay awake until very late and try to catch whoever was doing this red-handed. That night, he finished his homework and then got into bed, but he remained awake, and sure enough, at around 2 o'clock in the morning, he saw his door handle turning and a hand sliding through. Then he saw the landlord creep in and take some eggs from the fridge. Not only that, but the landlord then went into the bathroom, coming out a couple of minutes afterward. Then he slipped out once again, leaving the door unlocked. This creeped my dad out, but for some stupid reason, he still decided to stay at the apartment for a few more nights until he finally confronted the landlord. Money and wanting to save it made him tolerate it, I guess. This was before mobile phones, and even decent cameras that didn't cost a ton, so my dad had literally no way to get evidence and show the cops besides mere accusations. The next night, he once more heard the odd screeching and weird opera music coming from his landlord's room, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. That weekend, when his landlord went out shopping, he broke into his landlord's room, and what he found there was seriously disturbing. He found an old Kodak camera. Under this was some extremely low-quality pictures of himself in bed sleeping. He got out of there taking the pictures with him and went to the police station. He moved out of there shortly after, and later he heard that that same landlord had scared other residents of the apartment off after hearing the odd screechings and his opera music, and after seeing all their things moved around. We never knew what happened to the landlord, only that he would be facing some prison time. I seriously hope that he was never allowed to be a landlord again. When I finished university, I moved back home until I found a job. As soon as I found a job, I began looking for a place to stay on a website called Spare Room. I was contacted by James, who had a room to rent on the outskirts of the town I worked in. It sounded good, but he wanted to talk on the phone before inviting me to view it. We had a chat one evening, and it turned out we had some things in common. We both enjoyed fitness, particularly swimming, and we were both movie fanatics. By the end of the call, it felt like chatting with an old friend, and I was looking forward to meeting him. James did not specify his age, but I assumed he was in his 20s like me. When I went to view the property, he came out of the house next door to greet me. When he introduced himself as James, I was shocked. He was at least 50 years old, dressed quite conservatively, and looked like he was wearing a hairpiece. If he'd told me on the phone that he was in his early 20s, I wouldn't have questioned it. I went ahead with the viewing, but I'd already decided I wasn't going to rent a room from him. I wanted to live with people who were similar age to me. I was also put off by the house decor, which looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s. When I viewed the bedroom, it looked like it was occupied by a young person. James said that the previous tenant, Mark, was moving to London for work. Coincidentally, my name is Mark as well. James invited me to sit in the living room after the house tour. I didn't want to be rude, so I did. He explained that he cared for his elderly mother who lived next door. Then he started complimenting my style, saying I looked cool. He proceeded to put his hand on my leg, which made me feel very uncomfortable. When he asked if I was interested in the room, I said I had some other properties to view, but I would be in touch. I then made my excuses to leave. Everything about him screamed red flag, and I wanted to get out of that house. As soon as I was back in my car, I called my mom to tell her how freaked out I was, and I absolutely would not be living there. James texted me a few days later to ask if I thought any more about moving in. I lied and said I'd found somewhere closer to the town. I did eventually find something with other young professionals, which turned out to be great. Some months later, though, our town was shocked by the news that a man's body had been found in the fields on the outskirts. He was later identified as Mark. I didn't think much of it until I saw that the murder suspect was his landlord, James. The same James whose house I viewed. I saw him on the news and got instant chills. He was later convicted of Mark's murder. I was around 12 when this happened. It was a Saturday morning, and my parents were out of town for the weekend. They left my older brother to babysit, but as soon as they left, he did too. So I was sitting in the living room watching TV when the doorbell rang. Instead of looking through the peephole like a normal person, I flung open the door, eager for company. I thought it would be my neighbor friends, not two middle-aged men looking down at me. They asked if my parents were home, and I didn't even hesitate when I told them, no, they're actually out of town for the weekend. I don't know why, but it slipped out, and if I could scold the kid version of myself now, I would. They exchanged glances, and the older-looking man said, "Well, I'm your landlord, and we need to come inside and check a few things out." That's when I realized how much trouble I was in. I knew my landlord. He was a friend of the family, and he was not either of the men standing in front of me. Thank goodness for quick thinking, because I told them, "Yes, but I need to grab something first." And before they could reply, I shut the door and deadbolted it. I ran into the kitchen, grabbed the phone, and dialed my mom's number. She picked up, and the second I heard her voice, I broke down sobbing. I explained very quickly about the two guys at the front door and that they wanted to come in. I told her the one said he was the landlord, but I knew it wasn't, and I told her I was scared and for her to come home now. Then I heard pounding on the window. My mom heard it too, because the next thing she told me was that my dad was on the phone with the police, and I needed to make sure that the two men knew that. Through my tears, I yelled as loud as I could, "The cops are on their way," towards the window where the two men were standing. They responded by the window and said, "Hey, we're not going to hurt you, no need to cry. It's okay, we will leave." After that, it was just silence, and I couldn't see them anymore, as I assumed they had left. It seemed like a lifetime, but it was no less than 10 minutes later when the police arrived. My parents pulled into the driveway eventually, and my mom hugged me tighter than she ever had before. I was crying, and she was crying. I got a lecture on opening the door for strangers and how lucky I was to be alive, and my brother got yelled at and grounded. The cops took a report and surveilled the area for the two men, but never found them. I learned my lesson that day. I have no idea who those two men were or what their intentions were, and I don't ever care to find out. Our landlord is a complete creep with no boundaries. We rent an upper level of a duplex, and our landlord lives on the main floor. I moved in and have been happily renting for the last 6 years. My landlord has always been kind, cordial, helpful, and treated me like family, often exchanging Christmas gifts, congratulating me on new jobs, and even giving me a gift card when I completed college. The rent is cheap too, which is nice. 2 years ago, my boyfriend moved in with me, and it's been a hectic 2 years of combining households and trying to get organized while quickly realizing we're outgrowing our space. My landlord also retired from his job and has been home more. Within the last year, though, things have gotten weird around the apartment. Over the winter, our landlord stopped us on the way out the door when we were headed to work. He told us that we needed to clean the place up a bit as he had been poking around and noticed that it was messy. Undeniably, we were a bit disheveled from the holidays, so we both took some time off of work and got the apartment cleaned up well. But we were still disturbed by the comments of him coming into our home without our knowledge, so we purchased a security camera and waited to see what happened. Much to our horror, we found that the landlord has been entering our home without notice multiple times a week to gain access to the attic that he uses for storage. However, it's never an innocent trip up to the attic. He stops and checks each and every room to evaluate the cleanliness. I won't pretend we're the cleanest people out there, but we don't leave trash lying out. Our dishes are done, and we take care and make sure that we clean up everything that might attract mice or bugs. I would say it's not out of control at all. We have also realized our need to downsize and have secured a storage unit and have been slowly packing things we don't use and taking them to storage. Recently, we had 2 bats in our home. Most recently, there was one in our washer. Our landlord decided to call somebody to check the house for entry points. We both work evenings and are up late, so we asked when the earliest time of day was acceptable for somebody to come out. We told him we're more than willing to accommodate any time of day with proper notice. We never heard back. I woke up today to go to the bathroom and noticed my front door was open and our attic was open. I received a text message from the landlord at 10 a.m. saying that the bad guy would be there within an hour, and a call at 10:44 that I had missed. I checked our camera and saw that our landlord entered our apartment without notice while we were sleeping. He made a point to move some of the totes out of the way that needed to go to storage, and then he moved them back to where they were previously to make it appear that he hadn't been there. All the thoughts running through my head of, what if I had been walking around naked, or what if I heard it and thought it was an intruder and tried to defend myself and inadvertently hurt someone? Our landlord knows our sleeping times and he knows our work schedule, and we are essentially at his mercy. At this point, we live in a state of constant anxiety about our landlord just entering our home without permission. I want to say something, but at the same time, I have a fear of being asked to leave for saying something. Our apartment is the cheapest place in town, and it's helping us on our path to saving for a home in the coming year. With all these events, though, it has us questioning what we should do and if there's any legal action we can take. At the very least, it's incredibly uncomfortable to know that somebody walks through your home unannounced whenever they seem fit, and they think it's okay to do surprise inspections of our living space. I often wonder how many times in the last 6 years he's done this, and long before I had cameras, if he's ever watched me sleep or even set up cameras himself, something creepy like that.